depending on how you think 4:30 is. I'm Gil Allensworth, Chair of the Waste Management Committee meeting, and I want to welcome everyone here to rainy but beautiful South Carolina, specifically Aiken, if I don't trip over my own words. What I would like to do is go around the room and around the table and introduce yourself, starting with Mr. Tanner.
James Tanner, CAP 14.
Lisa Carrico, DOE. Bobby Williams, CAB.
Earl Shepherd, cab.
Susan Corbett, CAB.
Nina Spinelli, CAB.
Michael McAlance, Department of Energy, designated deputy federal official.
Okay. And just for the record, can we have the attendees in the back share share your name and your affiliation?
Joe Ortalo, public.
Jean Ridley, DOE.
Gerald Rudolph, CFO.
Joanne Williams. No affiliation on this.
Great.
Suzanne Rhodes, Liquid Motors.
Tom Clements, SRS Watch.
Susan Clinton, DOE. Kim Carlton, SRS.
And we've had two CAB members come in here. If you just take a second. If you introduce yourself, Dawn.
Dawn Gillis.
And she is with the CAB. And we had another gentleman, Dave.
David Hoyle, CAB.
Okay. Do we have anyone on the phone? Anyone on the phone? So we don't have to worry about anyone pressing button number 2.
We are 2 free at the moment.
Okay. This is a committee meeting for the waste management. Those of you that have joined us for full board meetings, this is a much less formal meeting. This is much more interactive. We encourage participation. We encourage discussion, whether it be around the table or for members of the public or your affiliations behind us. We do have 3 seats available at the table. You are more than welcome to come up and sit here if you'd like. But I do want to stress to everyone that this meeting and all our meetings are being recorded live. And to please, every time we speak, state our name and our affiliation before speaking. Please speak loudly and clearly. Also be warned that mics pick up idle chatter. They've never shared with me what that idle chatter is, but they say it's pretty hilarious. So be careful what you say. There's a good chance you're being recorded. Do we have someone just join us on the telephone?
Yeah, John Richards, EPA, Region 4.
Hey, John. How you doing today? It's Gil Allensworth, CAB. Appreciate you being with us.
I'll be in and out. Gonna get down the elevator and on my way home. I'll be back on the phone call.
All right. Thank you. Please stay. Please, we want to stay on topic. If you veer off topic, James will get you. There will be a public comment period where other comments are here. Anyone wishing to answer questions or address the CAB must come up to the microphone to my left and speak. This will ensure the online attendees can hear the comments or questions. There is no public comment sign-up sheet, so do not worry about signing in. For the members of the public that are not CAB members, please do us the favor and sign in the public sign-in sheet. Also, I'd like to remind CAB members for signing in on the CAB only sheet, and thank you, Nina, for doing that for me. Tonight we do not have any draft recommendations and no open recommendations. Last 2 weeks ago in Augusta, we closed everything out. So it is. So I haven't seen Sony. Is Sony here? Sonny, I apologize. Jean, do you have anything to share with us today?
I didn't prepare anything, but if you want,
I think you'll come up during conversation if we can just pull you up during conversation. Thanks a lot, Gene. There's been a lot of discussion around the 3H evaporator status. We had some discussion at full board meeting. We had a presentation given to us. I would like to know what the members of the CAB and others that may have heard that presentation, what your thoughts were and what you think would be good next steps for us to go forward. So I open it up to the committee. We know you weren't here, Don. You were greatly missed.
First one I ever missed.
So, but it was noted that you were
That's right.
back in down in my neck of the woods. How did?
Can you give a little brief, of what the conversation was? Is there any kind of contention?
Gene, can you give us kind of a? Are you?
Well, I just want a summary of.
Just a quick, just what was discussed.
Like a 90 second to 3 minute, just on what's going on, the status of the 3H evaporator.
Bill Barnes is here from SRR, who is the project manager for the 3H, but from a DOE perspective, the 3H, as you know, is down. What we talked about was basically the status of where we are on the repair, and then the slides will show you that, and how we're going forward with that. So any specifics you want on that, or you want to just wait, kind of look through the slides?
I see.
And then we have, yes, and the other presentation was on the SDUs. So you should have one for the,
I got. Let's see.
yeah, you should have one, there was one back there on
We'll hit
3H.
the SDUs afterwards.
Was that it, or you want to,
There wasn't anything in contention, was there? Just
not that I'm, no.
everything's on schedule and.
David, you had some questions
It's-
for the presentation.
Yeah, it's,
Can you elaborate on some of your questions and if you felt the presentation answered them to your satisfaction?
Yeah, I thought they did a good job in the presentation. The basic bottom line is they have determined a method to repair the evaporator. It'll hopefully be repaired and come back online in FY19 in time to help them prepare sludge batches for processing in the DWPF and processing salt waste into the salt waste processing facility. The evaporators are really, in my opinion, very important pieces of equipment in the liquid waste program. They're the things that evaporate off a lot of water to give them space to operate. They need space in those tanks as they close them and fill them with grout. They need space in order to prepare sludge batches. Now, we all know and have heard about the salt waste processing facility, which is hopefully going to come online in December of 2018, after which they'll be under a lot of pressure from a lot of different venues, including this one, to ramp up and start processing a lot of salt waste in order to be able to close those tanks. Without the evaporator, that'll be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do. My biggest concern about the salt waste processing facility is not the facility itself. It's a Cadillac of a processing facility, or it will be. It'll be able to process millions of gallons of waste a year. The big challenge, in my opinion, will be feeding that monster and also handling its output at the Saltstone facility. I see those as the two main choke points in the future of the liquid waste program. And I have strong concerns that they will not be able to feed it such that it'll operate at capacity, and they will not be able to take the feed that, if they are able to feed it, and process it into Saltstone. Those are the two severe choke points that are, I think, looming in the future for the liquid waste program. But the 3H evaporator is key on the front end, absolutely key.
And your questions you felt were adequately answered during the presentation.
I was relieved to hear that they had come up with a method for repairing the thing, because frankly replacing the 3H evaporator with a new evaporator would take much longer. And so being able to put a patch on it and get it going again, I was relieved to hear, yes.
So I'm kind of been talking to David, but did anyone else have questions of coming out of that presentation? Susan?
Susan Corbett, Cab. I just, one of the things I took away from it is that you can't always count on designs to last as long as they're supposed to. I mean, this is something that was supposed to last 30 years.
Too, yeah.
And this is a problem that we see in the industry in a lot of places. Things just don't last for whatever reasons. Whether this was probably a design problem, but or maybe it was a materials issue, but it certainly only lasted half as long as it was supposed to, and that's a little disappointing and concerning for me. So
Yeah, well, I think part of the problem was they were a victim of their own success in a way. They developed a lancing system to keep things moving through the evaporator and keep things from gumming up in there. Trouble is that hydro lance was far more powerful than they anticipated. It had a lot more erosion properties on the inside of the 3H evaporator, the way I understand it anyway.
I understood it.
And that caused it to have a problem long before they expected it to. It was an add-on. It was an accessory later installed.
Yeah. Going back to Susan, your point, I felt the same way when it was only a 15-year life, but then on the other hand, it's different, but the melter lasted way beyond, different situation, but the melter lasted way beyond its capabilities or what we thought it to be. So I mean, that's kind of, so as I sat there thinking about it, I was like, well, yeah, I'm kind of ticked that this only lasts 15 years, but I'm happy this lasted 13 when we only thought it was going to be 2. So it's kind of hard for me to reconcile the two, but that's just me. Dawn, did you ever work with these, or do you know much about these? I know you weren't at the meeting.
No.
Okay. So I'm not going to embarrass you and put you on the spot.
I wasn't in the waste part. We just sent stuff to the waste people.
Okay.
Bill, I had a question.
Sure. Tom? Yeah.
Careful.
The rules say you got to go over here.
Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. I wasn't at the last CAB meeting, and I'm followed some of this, but had a specific question based on the third slide, and maybe somebody can answer that. What is the status of the leaks identified in the bottom of the cone area, and what kind of problems, if there were any, did that produce, and how is any residual waste from the leaks being addressed, or if somebody could just talk about that a little bit?
That's a great question. I know that question was asked.
That's really all I had, thank you.
But, yeah.
Bill Barnes, Savannah River site, Savannah River remediation. As far as the status of the leak site, as I talked about in the presentation, we've removed the lagging and the insulation, identified the leak site at the very bottom of the cone of the evaporator. We had used ultrasonic measurement devices, used the robots to take measurements of the wall thickness, not just at the bottom, but all the way up the evaporator. And so from that, we were able to ascertain that we had good wall thickness, except for that very bottom of the cone, where the lance had eroded material. As far as the waste that leaked out, the evaporator's located in a secondary containment, a stainless steel shielded containment cell. So all that waste, we have the capability, and what we did is to jet or pump that waste directly into a waste tank. So nothing leaked out, no exposure to the environment or people, and quite quickly it was pumped into a waste tank, which back into our system, and that was taken care of. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, is that what caused the shutdown mainly, or?
It was the leak itself. Once we identified the leak that caused the shutdown, and we went about the process of finding the leak and coming up with a repair path.
David?
David Holcab. Bill, you know, this patching of the evaporator is going to save you time and money. Is DOE or the site giving any consideration to taking advantage of this time that you're buying with patching the existing evaporator with buying or building a replacement evaporator to be on spare for the future so that you don't get stuck in this situation again?
Sort of, and I'll explain that. The repair design will last us an additional 15 years of service, which in my looking at the system plan is well beyond the system plan needs for a 3H evaporator. But as I mentioned last month, as a contingency, we are starting the design of a new evaporator pot, just to be, in case the repair does not work for some reason, that we've already started that process, and then we would just kick off fabrication. If the repair is successful, which I think it will be, we wouldn't buy a spare because we don't anticipate that we'll need a spare in the life of liquid waste.
I see. So your contingency is to design a replacement but not necessarily construct.
Right. The trigger to construct would be only in the case that the repair was not successable.
And assuming you have a complete design, which I guess you have a design right now of existing evaporators, that's not going to be too tough. How long does it take to build one of these things?
The evaporator itself, I don't know the exact time, 6 to 8 months, but the all-in replacement is about 2 years. Yeah, so
2 years to what? Bid out, let a contract, construct, or is that 2 years to actually just construct?
No, 2 years would be the full award the construction, receive a new pot or evaporator, remove the old, install the new, and have it functional again.
I see. Thank you.
Bill, what would the cost on something like that be? I mean, I know it's...
Sure. Yeah, what we've done up to now with using the robots to identify the leak site, is needed in either path for repair or the replacement, because for the repair, we of course wanted to know what the cause was of the failure so that we could change the design to prevent it. So going forward, the cost of the repair is about 1.9 million. The cost of full replacement, in my estimation, and that's all in, like I just described, is 10 to 14 million.
10 to 14. Wow. And the 24 months shutdown.
Yes.
You said 1.9 to repair?
To repair, yes.
And the shutdown's much shorter.
Right, and the repair option, this calendar year, we will have it up and running versus the lengthy replacement option. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Joe?
Joe Ortal to the public. David raised some excellent points there, and I agree with all of them. The whole system comes to a grinding halt if you lose this evaporator. I think the evaporator can kind of keep up with the other things too. I mean, we'll find out when it starts up again. Bill, is there some kind of a system we are monitoring the corrosion rate on this? Because that 15-year life that we think we'll get out of the evaporator is pretty doggone close to the time you're going to need an evaporator to keep running, probably within the range of how good all these numbers are. So you definitely got to be in a position where you're going to have that evaporator in operation, either by fixing it or by replacing it if you can't fix it, or if it doesn't last 15 years. Bill, is there monitoring corrosion rates, anything like that going on with the repair?
You know, with the repair option, what we do now is we do have a structural integrity evaluation, but one of the difficulties for the evaporator is the actual vessel itself is encapsulated. There's insulation around the outside. Yes. Okay. And so you normally don't have access to the vessel wall itself. But with this, just the small amount of insulation and lagging we had to remove from the vessel, when we've done the evaluations, we're not going to re-insulate it. So I don't know of any plans to check corrosion, but now that it's exposed, we are looking at that, as well as
some remote ultrasonics or something like that.
right now we have the robots, we have the ultrasonic.
Life, and you need some lead time. It's going faster than you would project it to do, then start jumping on the replacement
Yeah,
evaporator, something
it's,
like that.
that's a good point.
Just lay a whole plan out.
Yep, we are going to do that.
But all the design work and all that relatively cheap part of a new evaporator, do that and get it to a point so you know what it would change and what roughly the cost would be for the replacement and all this. That sounds
Yep.
pretty good.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. Anybody else have questions about the 3H evaporator? David?
This isn't about the evaporator, but it is related. Does anyone here from DOE have an estimate on the cost of a replacement melter? For example, the melter that's going in right now, what did it cost?
It's like 30 million, wasn't it?
I don't have those numbers off the top. This is Jean Ridley, DOE. I don't have those numbers that I recall off the top of my head, but I think in the past, the cost of a melter, just the melter itself, was in the 35 million range. And then when you add the other cost, actual repair, I want to say, actual installation and all that, I want to say it was around 50. But I'd have to verify those numbers. What I can do is go back to my office and I'll get those numbers to James and he'll share them with the cap.
Mike McElhan's DOE, let's take an action to make sure we get the right numbers out there.
Thanks, Mike.
Gil, the reason I asked that question is DOE in its wisdom spent 35-something million
On a backup.
on a backup melter, but maybe won't spend the 10 to 14 million for a backup evaporator. I'm not sure of the wisdom.
I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead, G.
Okay, different design lives. The melter, when it was designed, was only designed for at that time, a 2-year lifespan. So you had to have replacements for the life of the program. The evaporator was designed for a 30-year life. Granted, in this case, due to the lancing, it failed prematurely. That's a lessons learned. We won't do it again. So that
Won't do the lancing again, or you won't do
we will be monitoring how we do that to ensure that we don't thin the wall of the evaporator.
That's a good point.
Michael?
Michael McElhan's DOE, there's also a difference in the procurement lead times. Procuring an evaporator would take a shorter period of time than finding a vendor that's capable of building a melter and then putting the procurement into fabrication. Those lead times are a lot longer. So the department has put in place, as you noted, a replacement process to make sure that we have a melter, and those melters are susceptible to infantile death because they're electrical. They can short out in a very short period of time. So we have to have one in the hopper ready to install and another one in the process of being fabricated. So it's a little more complicated than just buying another metal steel shell for an evaporator.
On the 3H evaporator status, I think we've discussed it pretty thoroughly, both at the full board and here this evening. Does the committee see any need for recommendation to come out of this? David, you asked some pretty good questions that led me to believe that you may want a recommendation.
Well, I don't know. I'm mulling it over, Gil. It might depend on some of the information they promised to give us
Okay.
based on the questions we get, but maybe.
Okay, because I mean, I like the conversation we had here, back and forth. I appreciate the information that we got from Gene, Bill, and Michael, and we had some good answers. But James, if we can keep 3H evaporator status on as a committee discussion for our August, I'd appreciate it. So we can circle back to it. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. And with that in extra information that you're going to be receiving, and please forward it on to David and the entire committee. I'd appreciate it. And we can go from there. Any more discussion around 3H evaporator? Don, you just look so excited about it. All right. Well, we're burning through this committee meeting tonight, but let's go to saltstone disposal units 6 and 7. This was eye-opening to me on the tour that we went on. Is it in April or May?
End of April.
End of April. The actual size of the facility is, I can sit here and explain it to people that haven't seen it. It'd be like me trying to explain what in his prime a Tiger Woods drive would look like at Augusta. I can't explain it. It's just enormous. But we did have quite a bit of a great discussion around the disposal units, and working my memory banks, because I don't have my notes with me from the actual full board meeting. Susan, you asked questions about the liner in particular, as I recall.
Right, yeah, I was wanting to know how long it would last, but that doesn't seem to really matter, so.
So the reason I'm bringing it up is so you are okay with what the information that you were given?
It answered my question, yes.
Very,
Say I was okay.
very
but it was answered.
politically charged answer. I want to hear the comments and the thoughts of the committee. David, you look like you're chomping. And I want that on the record, chomping.
Chomping.
And I don't like Florida Gators, so I'm just letting you know.
Well, David Hoycap, I did find it interesting that we were told that the future vaults of this same sort, the same as SDU 6, will all, their intention, unless I misunderstood them, is that all these future vaults will have a coating on the inside, like this one was put in retroactively because of the leak problems, and that all of these SDUs will have monitoring systems underneath them, not just under the pad itself, but I understood that there would be lysimeter systems for all of the future SDUs. That's something that I know wasn't intended originally, so I guess I'm encouraged that the site is learning some lessons from the construction of these facilities. It was an impressive site out there at SDU 6, and it also appears that constructing 7, 8, 9, and I don't know exactly how many more, 7 through 12 will be constructed on almost a continuous basis. And judging from the output of the SWPF, they're gonna need those on that kind of schedule. So it sounds like they're learning some lessons from building these things that will help us in the future. I was also impressed by the fact that SDU 6 was built and completed way ahead of schedule and under budget, to the tune of $20 million in 18 months. I love hearing that. Love hearing that. We don't hear it enough.
Agreed. David, now the question I have, just as a guy out here on the street, and I'm going back in my memory, and I remember us talking about Saltstone, and you brought it up earlier with the evaporator, saying that we have this Cadillac, and you're worried that we have points that where we're going to be able to run like mad, but we're not going to be able to move the material. Is this one of the bottlenecks that you see that we won't be able to get it to SDUs?
Yeah. Yeah, this has been a sore spot for me for some time. Way back last year, I expressed concern that the SWPF will be able to produce at least 6 million gallons a year once it's up and running and tested in. But the Saltstone facility has, I don't think, ever processed more than 1 million gallons of salt waste in a year. And to expect it to be able to keep up with the SWPF with just one mixer, to me, just doesn't make sense. There's no redundancy there other than to, yank out one mixer and throw in another. But if SWPF is pumping along at 500,000 gallons a month, they don't have time to wait for another mixer to be installed. I believe they need to have more than one mixer online. And we were promised to get a briefing on all of the reliability improvements that the Saltstone disposal facility, right? SDF? Production facility, thank you. That all the reliability improvements that the Saltstone production facility has endured. But we haven't gotten those briefings yet, and I still have this concern. I see the Saltstone facility being a blockage for the SWPF, and my concerns haven't gone away in that regard.
Gene, does DOE have in a informal, conversational way, as our committee meetings are, does DOE have an answer to David's concern? Or Michael? I'm not looking at you, Michael, or Michael.
So, Michael McLean's Department of Energy. Do we have James, do we have this on the work plan for this year? I don't recall that being on the work plan.
Nor do I.
So, no, we don't have anything scheduled for that. In a conversational way, the department has focused a lot of time and energy at looking at Saltstone. As David noted, it is a potential choke point. There are a number of potential choke points. I believe in previous presentations to the CAB, the department representatives have shown you a gear train, a gear chart that shows all the interconnected gears. If any one particular gear, and Saltstone is one of those gears, SDUs are another, SWPF is one, DWPF is one, sludge washing, etc. If any one of those gears doesn't turn as fast as it needs to, the whole machine slows down. So Saltstone is one area where the department has put a lot of effort in looking at can the facility produce it, and there's reliability issues that have been addressed. I don't know any of those off the top of my head. It's been too long since I've been out of liquid waste to even try and do that. But we've had similar reviews at DWPF, because DWPF will be producing glass a lot faster with salt waste processing going, and there's a number of areas like this. So we have looked at those, but I can't provide you any specifics here.
Thanks. Dawn?
So Dawn Gillis, CAB, following on to that, I'm sure you've done all kinds of systems analyses to come up with these choke points. And I'm sure you have all kinds of plans to deal with these choke points. So somehow can we get a presentation that's based on the choke points that goes from the tanks to glass logs and to salt stone, so we can get hear what all those choke points are and what's being done to, like having a melter in the shed. All these, what are you going to do about all these different choke points? Because I'm hearing more about choke points today than I had before.
Mike McAlean's DOE. I'm not trying to tell you there are more choke points than there ever were before. There aren't.
No,
As you
I'm saying we
mentioned,
just
have
hadn't
talked-
heard them all. We just hadn't heard them all. So that's what I want to get a better feel for. You put in you put in salt waste processing facility to get rid of that choke point. Now that's creating a bunch of other choke points because it's got a huge throughput.
So before you're heading with this in terms of providing advice to the department, because we've had a lot of technical folks look at this. We think we understand it. So help me, because I'm going to go back and talk to Jim Folk, who's the line manager responsible for this. And so help me understand where you'd be heading with this, so that we can review whether or not to change your work plan.
Well, it's the whole point of getting out of the tanks, and we the public are interested in getting out of the tanks. If they're major choke points that have issues, they've got $100 million things, they've got 15-year projects, they've got, what happens if that these things go down, and if one of these pieces goes down, it's gonna stop a bunch of getting out of the tank stuff. So I don't know if we can have an informal thing at the next committee meeting, or if it can be. I haven't looked to see what the rest of the schedule looks like for the year. If it can be added to one of the presentations that's currently in the schedule. I haven't looked at that, but that's just, it's the whole point of, are we, what's going to hold us up from getting out of the tanks? And like you said, you've done a lot of work. You've looked at all this stuff. We would just like to understand what these risks are, risks to getting out of the tanks. It's not, you know what I'm saying.
So Mike McAlean's DOE, to repeat back what I think you just said, Dawn, the committee's interested in getting out of the tanks, so are we.
Right.
And you would like to get some reassurance or some understanding of the systems or reviews that were done to identify the critical components, the critical capabilities within the high-level WPF.
Could be the choke points.
That's what I mean by critical.
Okay,
by
okay.
The critical capabilities.
Okay.
Because there's, it's like a critical path in a schedule. You address one critical path, and 6 hours off that critical path is another critical
Right,
path. So
exactly.
as the department works and optimizes one part of the system, another part that needs a focus, and we've looked at multiple paths on that. So let me take what you're asking for back to Jim Folk, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Gene, I have a question, and it's just my memory. How much did Tank 6 cost? From beginning to end?
Project cost.
Oh, okay, I thought we knew that.
We'll get that.
The- it-
Yeah, it was about 100.
About 100?
I think you briefed that at the cast meeting, like 100.
Yeah, I think we've had that conversation. I just couldn't.
Budgeted for like 140
and it came in
100. So,
I'm sorry, you said SDU said?
Yes, yeah, I misspoke.
Okay, you said tank six.
You gotta
so I'm
understand,
sorry.
I don't know all these things to say correctly.
Jean Ridley, DOE. SDU 6, the actual cost, we just got in the May data. Looks like total cost is going to come in about 118,
118? Okay, thank you. So,
which is less than what's on your
Right.
sheet.
No,
Like I said, I just
much
got
applause
final.
for that. So
numbers.
thank you. So Michael, you were asking Dawn. Oh, I'm sorry, did I cut somebody off? Well, I'm sorry. We'll come right back. But you said what's your concern? Where you're going? My concern is that and I may be making a mountain out of a molehill here. My concern is we're going to spend. I don't think the next one will cost 118 million. I think the next one will probably be less expensive. But we're going to spend $100 million on another tank. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and we're going to build those, But if we can't fill them,
Yeah.
that's I guess I'm looking at close to $500 million or more. No.
Can I address the question?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
Pam
I want you to
Pam
tell-
Marks, Department of Energy.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this at the CAB meeting. The reality is there's a certain volume of material that's going to come out of the process that has to be put in the tanks. So there's no question about how many tanks
Filling.
we need.
Okay.
The question becomes, based on the rate of processing, how quickly do we need those tanks? So
Okay.
that we would never have a scenario where we'd have tanks sitting there unfilled because the volume of material that is going to be output is fixed.
I guess, yeah, that's where I'm getting confused with choke points and things. So that's where,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
No, I think David's question was, can salt processing facility keep up with the output of SWPF and filling of the tanks?
Okay.
That's a choke point.
Okay,
Do you-
good. Thank you for connecting the dots.
To use a familiar analogy, if you will, for the choke points by that, it'd be like designing your car with a NASCAR engine, NASCAR tires, NASCAR fuel, but then you're putting in your Model T drivetrain or transmission. You can only go as fast as that transmission will take. Everything else may be able to go racing full speed, but the system breaks down and stops at the weakest component. So that's why I call it critical capabilities instead of critical path or anything like that, because the time isn't as much as where critical path denotes schedule time. My term, critical capabilities, really is more in terms of how fast you can process the volumetric rate at which you can process the waste.
Gotcha. I skipped somebody back here, I'm sorry.
I said a quick question.
Tom. You said hit me over the head. Yeah, or just don't hit me in the head.
Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. I just had a quick question, maybe some of y'all can answer, or Gene. On page 5, the bottom slide, SDU 6 status, it's got 5 bullet points. And the last one, approval to commence operation CD4 package submitted to DOE headquarters May 2017. I was just wondering what the status of that is, or how long does that take? That's one question. And then the second question is any salt waste being processed now to go into the older style units? I'm unclear if anything is happening now that the system's kind of shut down. So just 2 questions. Thank you.
To answer your first question on the CD4, we had the first pre-brief yesterday. The briefing for headquarters will be next Tuesday, and then it has to go up to EM1 for approval. I expect all of that to be done before the end of the month, and then the manager will give, once all the pre-start and items are closed out and any punch list items, he will give the authorization to begin. I really do expect all of that to occur before the end of the month. On your second question, I just went blank what it was.
Is anything being processed, ARP,
Yes.
MCU, or anything?
No, because the melter was down, we're not processing any material through ARP MCU. However, tank 50 is what feeds Saltstone production facility. They have just finished going through their pre-checks. They expect to start processing that material tomorrow. So there will be some processing into the Saltstone disposal units, which they're going into numbers 3 and 5 right now. Well, I'm sorry, 5 is done, 3 is going into 3. Yes.
Gene, so 3 and 5 are active now. They would be followed by 6. I know that when we went to the circular tanks, at some point we left Vault 4, which was not full, but we were having so many problems with it, we left it. Is there any plan to ever place waste in Vault 4 again?
Never, because we put what we call clean grout on top of that to seal it, and there will be no more material added to it.
So all the cells are full either of waste or clean grout now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. As soon as you sit down, we'll get you.
Any other comment around the table? All right. With the Saltstone disposal units, specifically off of the presentation from last month's full board meeting, does this committee feel that we have any recommendations to come from that? Don't all speak at once, people. Thank you, Don.
Dawn Gillis Cab. On these critical capabilities, we have a recommendation on the canyon about choke points.
Okay.
And I'm
That's in nuclear materials?
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if we should have a similar one for liquid waste systems.
Doesn't sound like, from what I heard from Pam, it doesn't sound like we need one. But, David?
Well, what would our recommendation be? I mean, give us more information? Well, we've already talked about asking DOE to give us a series of briefings on the various critical components in the system. I'd rather hear what DOE has to say. I've been waiting for some time in that respect before generating a recommendation, because frankly, I don't have enough information, I don't believe.
Well, that's kind of one of the reasons, as you say, you've been waiting for some time.
Well, that's a good point.
And the other thing is that the information's there. They have the information. They've already done all the analysis, et cetera. This formalizes that the CAB is interested. I'm not saying we have to do it. I'm just kind of bringing it up as a discussion point. But this formalizes the CAB's interest in it and would formalize a response to it. So it might be that if we can't get it into this year's work plan, it would end up being a presentation for next year's work plan. Because this is certainly not stuff that's like going to make a change in a month. You know, this is long-term stuff. So.
I do know our work plan is full. I mean, there's no question about that. But David, I guess that's where my thought of a recommendation is I know you want more information, and I respect that. But for my question is, why don't you wipe the slate clean? And if you could make it perfect, why don't you make a recommendation off of what you would see as perfection, knowing that it's unattainable? To give you an idea, I've written a recommendation for strategic and legacy management that we'll talk about next week in another board meeting. And it's completely different topics. So there's not scientific issues in talking about retirement accounts and pensions. But I don't have and James and I had that conversation before this meeting commenced, but I don't have the information that I want yet. And so I've written a very rough draft. You haven't seen the email yet, but a very rough draft of the draft without the information that I would like to have, and basically in a perfect world, what I would like to see DOE do. I don't know if that applies to what you're doing, but it did for me. Now I've requested, and there's been some issues with vacations and things that we think that we just haven't got the information. I get it. I mean, I completely understand that people have lives, even if I don't. But it's okay. But that's how I view the recommendations. Let's put this out there.
Mm-hmm.
This is just Gil speaking. Let me put this recommendation out here and hear what DOE comes back, because you have an expertise that I do not understand. And so that's just what I'm asking, is for you to say, perfect world, this is what I would like to see, and see what DOE says.
Well, Don's suggestion about, maybe mirroring what we did on the Nuclear Materials Committee in terms of making a recommendation, requesting DOE identify choke points and identify what they're doing about them, that sort of thing. That might be worth doing. I'll give some thought to that, and maybe share it with you, Don.
And we'll have an official answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I like our conversational style.
At the very
but-
least, it'll lead into an item we could add to the work plan next year.
Right. Because I'm worried about trying to load anything into that work plan, as it is now. Granted, we'll sit down in February, which just seems like tomorrow to me, and figure out next year's work plan. And that's something that I would definitely want, hear from you and want to put on it, since since there's a committee member that's interested in it. I think that's very important to take into consideration when we build work plans. So, any more discussion about saltstone disposal units 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? No? No? All right. At this point, I would like to open up the public comment period of our committee meeting. Anyone that wants to speak, this is a free forum where you can speak and share the issues that you may have or may want to have some things addressed from the Waste Management Committee. I would please ask, if you do want to come forward to the table, speak to the microphone, clearly stating your name and your position within the community or the general public, and we want to hear what you have to say. I feel like that guy in Ferris Bueller. Okay. Tom?
Open mic night.
Ben Stein. Was that who it was? Ben Stein?
Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. I could have made this just a minute ago, but I think the discussion you just had about choke points or critical path forward with the high-level waste system is important. A couple years ago, there were comments about we don't know what's going to happen with salt waste processing facilities. Is it really going to work? Seems like there's more positive discussion now, but to me, it's still unknown until the thing's hooked up and all these systems are working. But I think this is exactly the thing that the public and the CAB is going to be paying more and more attention to, and it's going to, it's the essential program at the site. So I think it behooves the CAB to keep asking questions and to try to get presentations from DOE, because I'll be mindful of those. But I think it's important for DOE to take the initiative to inform the CAB about places where there might be issues along the way, because particularly if there were some problems after startup and operation and something went down, DOE would have been open in informing you. So I think it would help them as well if they instruct the CAB about what's going on now. Should this happen this year? I don't know, but wow, all of a sudden we're in June of this year, and December of next year is going to come really fast. So I think the sooner some kind of presentation happens, the better. And I think DOE's demonstration of the system and how these components fit together is important, and comparing it to something else as you did, I think it's a good analogy. And this is a total aside, but I look at the MOX plant, who engineer compares it to what they bought is 1980 technology from France, like buying a Renault car that met safety standards back then, and how do they backfit it to get it to operate now? I don't think that the high-level waste issue is as bad as the MOX project. And on MOX, there's no discussion about presenting the way forward, none whatsoever. How are the systems going to work? How it's going to function? What about the waste? What about processing material inside the facility? There is absolutely no discussion. So I think you guys, at least with the high-level waste issue, can set the bar high where there is a full and open and honest discussion about what's going on. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me while I stagger up.
Take your time. Take your time.
I'm Suzanne Rhodes with the League of Women Voters of South Carolina. I'm really encouraged to hear all the talk today about tank closure. That's how I came in. I was really involved 60s, 70s, had life. I'm back. And the tanks, the tank closure hadn't changed that much really when you look at all you all had to do in order to juggle waste and live a safe life here. I'm really proud, by the way, of the technical work that happens here. I keep some track of some of the other federal facilities, and I'm proud of you all. As a sidelight, because of tank closure, the League of Women Voters is opposed to bringing in anything we don't have to have here. Includes German waste. Germany's perfectly capable of leading the EU on their own waste program as the law requires. Canada waste, well, particularly that's a little more complicated for the League because of the molybdenum, but the liquid coming down here and demanding some treatment on site or on the way down maybe even is of great concern to us. But I really like hearing about the tanks today, and that's your underlying, I've heard that beneath many of your comments, and I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Joe? Sorry, you're not really close. Okay.
Joe Ortaldo, Public. A couple of comments. These are not recommendations necessarily, but just information thing. On the 3H evaporator, y'all might want to consider just asking DOE to update you when the information is available on two things. Number one, what's their monitoring program on the repaired 3H? In other words, for whatever it is. I mean, it's not an easy job, but it's something I'm sure they're going to be doing something on. And then along with that, what's going on with the design and cost estimates of a potential 3H evaporator. Again, you don't go buy it or anything until you're sure you really need it, but you're watching how on track are you for the 15-year life, and if it looks like you're in trouble, then you can pick up the design and go forward and on a little more rapid scale. The bottleneck issue, that's tank closure. You got the system plan, the latest system plan. Is everybody familiar with that? I know it's not the monster you want to take home and read at night, but that basically sets up what has to be done to get the tanks closed by the latest schedule that they got. Now you're asking about choke points, and choke points can really mess up that system plan if something goes wrong with them. So Mike, when you talk to Jim, this is something you might want to talk to him about it. If you took the combination of the existing system plan and the gear chart, and you identify the key pieces of equipment that you got in there, you know, which are single, if that fails, saltstone for instance, what's the impact on the system plan? And what could you do to eliminate that bottleneck? But everything goes, and Mike mentioned this, that everything is going to be limiting someplace. You're going to start someplace, and one thing is going to be limiting. But the present system plan, right now, I don't know what it is, but Mike knows that, or Jim knows that for sure. But then as you go down the line, if that's not a problem, you know, something else. And Mike, when you and Jim get together and come up with how you want to present this, I suggest you maybe start with a system plan and a gear chart, try to combine those two and identify which is the bottleneck at which given condition, particularly the ones where you've only got one of them. Yeah. And you don't have a spare that can go in fast.
Looking for a consulting job?
I do this when I come here. Right? I'm retired. I want to be my own boss. I want to do what I want to do. But you're getting free consulting for what it's worth.
Thanks, Joe. Sir, you gotta wait. Yeah, you had your shot. You gotta wait to the end. Sir.
Hello, I'm Jerry Rudolph. I'm a citizen. I'm a member of Sierra Club, but have no official capacity with them. But I, like most South Carolinians, are looking forward to the day when there's no more waste to be disposed of, and there's no more waste brought here, and that we can finish the job of safely disposing of the waste that has been generated. And I'm listening for that date. When are we going to stop? When are we going to stop when is it going to be done and no more waste is being brought in here?
Thank you. You can go.
My turn?
Your turn, Dawn.
Dawn Gillis, CAB. Just one little quick, can you give us a real quick update on what's going on with the stacking, the canister stacking, where you stand on that?
Double stacking?
Huh? The double stacking?
stacking?
Yeah. That's what that means. Did you get that? No.
Yeah, double stacking is
emoji,
the,
I guess.
Gene Redley, DOE, double stacking's going well. We have done, I think, a total of 200. Is it 200 or 300? Yeah, 300 double stack cans. I get the years mixed up. how many we've done each physical year, but it's still going.
Running into any kind of issues, operational issues with it, or just?
No, just we're not stacking right now because we're replacing the tires on the shielded canister transporter, but that's routine. And so once that's back, we'll keep on going. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments before I tell everyone to go home?
Just one more.
Oh, David. Go ahead.
50 minutes we gotta fill up here.
Actually, I have a quick question. I don't mean to
Go ahead.
get
Earl
over on
Shepherd.
that. Yeah, Earl Shepherd Cab. Ms. Jean, you said you're changing out the tires of the shielded canister? So is that Goodyear, Michelin, Firestone? Who comes in to do that?
They are a specialty type tire. I don't know the name.
Storm coming in or something?
It's 3A.
They're a specialty company that makes those tires for us. I don't know the name of the company off the top of my head, but yeah, no, we don't go down to Lowe's and Tire Depot and pick those up. They are specialty.
Just making sure there wasn't recaps or anything.
No recaps.
There is a large manufacturing facility in Aiken County, Bridgestone Firestone. I'm just saying. Just saying. Michelin's up the road in Lexington. Just saying. So.
There you go.
Mr. David.
David Hall, Cab. I was just wondering if any of the DOE representatives can give us an update on the status of Transionic waste shipments to WIP. As of the last meeting, they had accomplished 3, and I was wondering if that number has changed at this point.
Jean Ridley, DOE. I also have oversight of the solid waste program. Yes, we've done one more shipment, but I can't tell you how many more and when they're going to happen at this point. Right now, we're working with Carlsbad. They are going through continuous reviews of documentation to certify waste to go to the facility. We have waste that was previously certified. That's what we are currently shipping, but the remainder waste streams all have to go through this documentation review. And from what it appears to be, that's going to be a long, drawn-out process.
Thank you.
Any other comment or question? Sensing, I think that's a Herald term, isn't it? Sensing no other conversation. So realizing that we're not going to have any more conversation, I want to thank everyone for attending this month's Waste Management Committee meeting. As has been discussed in the full board meeting and was voted on, we've had a change in how committee meetings and full cab meetings are going to be conducted. I appreciate each and every one of you on the committee and in attendance from. It's not an audience. That's what I feel like Johnny Gilbert from Wheel of Fortune or something. But everyone, for every public participation. Thank you, Dawn, for being here. We are trying to become, this is Gil's terms, trying to become more conversational, trying to get more dialogue between committee members and the public and having people involved. I think this was a great first meeting, a great first step toward that. I particularly just highlight for me, Pam, I appreciate it. You helped connect a lot of dots for me that may not have been connected in months, but or ever, just by saying a few things. So thank you.
You're just in my wheelhouse.
Thanks, David, Susan, Dawn. I really appreciate it. Now, Bobby, if you'd speak up, I'd appreciate it. And this is the first. This is the first meeting I've never heard Nina not say anything. So, but she was playing with the air conditioning. She must be hot or cold, one of the two. I notice these things, Nina. I notice. But no, this is what we're talking about. this is what we like to see, a little more conversation, and hopefully this was agreeable to everyone. I surely enjoyed it. James, thank you very much for facilitating the lead of this change, and have a great 2 months, and we'll see you in
Well, you're gonna see everybody in July.
the Applied Research Center in
Yes.
July. That's what I was trying to. We're at the Applied Research Center in July for our full board meeting in beautiful New Ellenton, South Carolina. So thank you all, and anyone on the phone, thank you for attending. And this meeting is adjourned.